It's the 10th of May. It's about 9:15 in the morning UK time. And because so many people have asked, I find myself having another look at the horoscope of the United States of America. There's two or three different charts for the American country. I use the Sibley chart, the one that's used by the majority of astrologers. This is set for the time of the actual Declaration of Independence, the signing of the Declaration on the 4th of July 1776, around 10 past 5 in the afternoon in Philadelphia, giving a 12 degrees Sagittarius ascendant. So, I'm going to look first of all at the transits, but then I want to comment on the US chart particularly. I'm not looking at minor transits. I'm not looking at the coming Mars transits or Jupiter or Saturn, because the USA is now sort of nearly 250 years old, and Jupiter and Saturn, they take 12 and 29 years to go round the sky, so there's going to be a number of different versions of the same cycles with them. Uranus has been round the sky at least 2 times, nearly 3 times since America's been born. So I'm not really that worried by what Uranus is doing. Plus, Uranus doesn't seem to be making any type of big transits over the coming 4 or 5 years, with the exception of sextiling the American Chiron, Ceres, Venus, Jupiter, and eventually Sun over the next few years. So I'm not worried by Uranus. What I am looking at is the progressions and Neptune and Pluto. I remember 16 and a half years ago, 16 and a half years ago, September the 11th, 2001. I remember what I was doing that day, and I remember what I was looking at astrologically. And at that time, the progressed sun in America's chart was at 27 degrees of Aquarius, on top of its natal moon. This is something that happens once every 365 years. Nothing like that is going on now. The progressed sun in America's chart is now at 13 and a half degrees of Pisces, in conjuncting America's Saturn but trining its sun. No big deal. The progressed moon in America's chart is currently at 27 and a half degrees of Sagittarius, in a relatively healthy position, and it's not going to be making any big changes soon. In a year and a quarter, it will oppose America's sun. That happens every 27 years. Again, no big deal. In the next few years, Neptune in the sky will oppose the American Neptune. This will be America's Neptune's return and a half, 1.5 cycles. Neptune is a 168-year cycle, so 252 years on average, 250 years after the USA's founding, Neptune in the sky will oppose the USA's Neptune. This will create a kind of dissolving influence. But Neptune in the American chart, square Mars, is not really a major issue. It doesn't have any major rulerships. I don't see it as a problem. To me, the problem is Pluto. Pluto in the sky is now in Capricorn, where it was when America was founded. And the Pluto return starts in February 2021, I think. Hold on a second, I've got it. Oh no, I don't have it anymore. It starts in about 3 years' time, 4 years' time. In the American chart, there are 3 fundamental aspects of challenge. Only 3, which when I'm dealing with a client's chart, I think, okay, that's easy. There's Mars square Neptune. Now that's not really a fundamental challenge. That's a little bit of fantasy. Fantasy stays between the ears. The imagination can be created, is what I say to clients with Mars square Neptune. But in a nation's chart, it makes its perception of itself. I think that America sees itself as being the way it wants to be rather than dealing with it the way it is. Its perception in the outside world is very different to its perception from internally of itself, from home. but that is not a major problem. The two major issues in America's chart are, in a challenging sense, because there's plenty of positives as well, is that there is a retrograde Mercury in Cancer in the 8th house, the Scorpio house, opposite retrograde Pluto in Capricorn in the 2nd house. 2nd and 8th house deal with values. With retrograde Mercury in the 8th house, there's always going to be issues around trust and transparency involving other people's money. Pensions, mortgage, investment, sponsorship, funding, shared resources, interest, anything that's outside of one's own resources, other people's money. And with Pluto retrograde in the 2nd house, there's going to be a lack of clarity of understanding of what is of true value and worth, whether it is money, assets, possessions, resources, food, property, but things of value and worth. Mercury opposite Pluto is a difficult aspect. In an individual, when young, it induces paranoia, phobia and fear. When older, it gives the potential for purging, detoxing, cleansing, eliminating and purifying. And when older, it gives psychological depth and insight into human behaviour and an understanding of what makes people behave and act and think and feel the way they do. In a nation's chart, I suggest that it does give a latent fear and phobia of the outsider, a little bit of xenophobia. At the same time, it also gives a distrust of issues around money. Adds to this that when the American independence, on the 4th of July 1776, the Sun was very strongly square Saturn, 1.5 degrees, getting stronger. So the America's born under Sun square Saturn. Great for hard work, discipline, structure, boundary and effort. Difficult in terms of taking orders, always feeling as if there's pressure, gravity, blockage, restriction and limitation. And Saturn rules Capricorn, which in the American chart is the 2nd house. Resources, money, possessions, property. So there's a recurring theme here of, if America were a person, I'd be saying there's a recurring theme of fear of being undervalued, never having enough. With Saturn squaring the Sun in the horoscope, and the Sun ruling the 9th house, the area of foreign travel, of philosophy, of higher education, religion, belief systems, and trust, it's talking about, with Saturn square the Sun, of having trouble in trusting anyone outside of oneself. It is a challenging chart, but it's a chart that's been in existence for 250 years. The Pluto return is coming up. As I understand it, America is quite a convoluted country. It seems dichotomized. There seems to be the liberals on the left and on the east and the west, and the mainstream centre is more right-wing. I'm not so sure that America will split up. I've said it will in the past, but I do think it's dysfunctional. It is not just down to the present incumbent. This has been brewing since the days of Nixon and even before the Kennedy assassination, and possibly as far back as the time of the gold standard being loosened up against the dollar. There does seem to be a number of agendas here, and the main issue here, as far as I can see, is distribution or lack of distribution of wealth. The dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots seems to be getting stronger and stronger. And I think that were America to go on a program of equality and sharing, making sure that everyone had equal medical care, equal financial provision, then America would be the country that eventually would export its philosophies into the world, and the whole world would benefit from a better place. But whilst it is a country where the haves just possess more and more and more, and 1% of the population own 80% of the wealth, the dichotomy and the imbalance of that will eventually fragment it in some shape or form. If it were an individual, I'd be saying, wake up, smell the coffee, start disseminating values and wealth whilst you still can. More on this perhaps another time, but I've got the horoscope of Israel to look at as well. And we've got the Mars-Uranus conjunction, Mars-Uranus square in the next few days. Take care, world. Catch you tomorrow.